Hey Reefers, how you doing? I'm back again with another video. Had a couple people requesting just kind of a walkthrough of the tank and the setup and wanted to see what made this whole thing tick. So figured I could start out here in the garage and aka the fish room. So, you know, lots of fish stuff sitting around, lots of spare parts. It's a mess out here right now as I'm trying to get everything cleaned up and mounted and in its happy place. But figure I'd walk you through. So it starts out with I think that's a 44 gallon, something like that, brute container, RODI system running into there, and down here to a lovely little True Union ball valve. And you'll notice that I actually don't have that plumbed into my salt mixing container. The reason that I chose not to plumb it into it is because I like having the ability to kind of control when the salt system has, you know, water in it. So everything down here is very straightforward. The pump has two valves on it. As it's set up right now, as you can see, it's going to run out and into this hose. I use the hose to pump water into the house, and so, you know, I can use that for RODI water or for salt mix. If I flip that valve and flip that valve, then you'll have the water coming out of the bottom and up into here, down and across here, and then into the salt mixing container. Now, let's see if we can see this. I don't know if we'll get it with the light, but what I did here is I actually put a 45-degree angle onto this, and then, you know, I'm running a piece of just PVC into here, and I happen to know what the gallons are that are in this container based upon where the water level is on that piece of PVC. It also helps to mix the salt a little bit better. The other thing that I would recommend doing, and I don't know if you can see that at all, but maybe you can, and yes, I actually have a little sand at the bottom of this right now. I'm not sure why, so I gotta pull that out and get it cleaned up. But as you can see, I've got a 90-degree angle, or a 90-degree elbow at the bottom of this. And the reason that I did that is because no matter where you drill that uniseal into your container, you're not going to actually drain all the water out of the container unless you've got that 90 on there. So that's a pretty important step to make sure that you do. Okay, so now we're back into the house, and this is a shot that you've already seen before in my previous videos. Lighting on this tank is from a Kessel AP700, which appears to be doing better after the most recent software update for the iPad. So I'm crossing fingers that everything continues to work really well with it, but you know, not holding my breath just yet, because there are still some problems, but generally speaking, it's going pretty well. So feeding, you'll notice that I have an Eheim everyday feeder. I opted for that over the Apex feeder. Reason for that being that the Apex feeder, the one that I got, actually just didn't work, and there's actually been a number of people who has said that they had some issues with it. So instead of fighting it and going back and forth, I just went for an Eheim feeder, and I'll show you guys the programming that's set up for that here in just a minute. So that basically what happens is the return pump shuts off, the skimmer shuts down, the ATO shuts down, the feeder does its couple of cycles, and then all of the equipment waits about 5 minutes after the return pump comes back on before it you know, goes back in line with the skimmer and the ATO. So all right, so let's look downstairs, and downstairs is a little bit of a mess right now, actually, because I'm in the middle of cleaning up and redoing some wiring. But this is the Synergy SS44 sump. I've got a 9-inch refugium section on there. It does run two 4-inch filter socks, and then goes into the refugium, then to the skimmer section. Skimmer's Diablo DCS 250. Massively oversized for this system, but I tend to like to oversize my skimmers, and this is actually kind of a plan for a future upgrade as well. So pretty happy with it. As you can see, obviously the refugium light is causing a lot of algae growth on that left side of that skimmer, so I need to pull that out and get it cleaned up. Other chemical filtration is handled by EcoBac Bio Pellets and Avast Marine. with a biopellet nozzle. That's just a standard Vast Marine reactor with the biopellet nozzle. Return pump for right now is a MagDrive 18. I'm probably going to change that out for an Ecotech Vectra very soon, but for right now it's sufficient. Runs my manifold and keeps everything nice and happy. And as you can see, in the back, this stand isn't even finished out. This was quite literally a very rushed job putting the tank together, so I'm having to kind of put everything in place now and go back and fix things. But we had bought a new house and I had to get the tank set up, and so sometimes you do what you have to do in order to make things work. The only thing that I'm really dosing in this tank is 2-part solution. I'm doing that via BRS dosing pumps, 1.1 milliliter per minute on the BRS pumps, and all of the dosing happens right there out of another Synergy setup. This is the first 2 chambers are my calcium and magnesium, or I'm sorry, my calcium and alkalinity solutions. Next 2 chambers are actually just RODI water, because I wasn't dosing anything else, and so instead of having a huge and nasty looking container underneath there for RODI, I figured I would just go ahead and switch that out and use the remaining 2 chambers for that. Flow inside of the tank is a Vortec MP40 on the right hand side and a Jabao WP25 on the left. You'll notice that left glass is really dirty. That's because there's a frag tank over there that marries up to the side of the big tank. If I had it to do over again, I never would have set it up this way, but lessons learned. And again, this is all stuff that's kind of moving toward a future upgrade anyway, so not a huge deal at the moment, because it's all going to get replaced. So as far as any of the plumbing stuff goes, really simple, really straightforward. It's just I went for a very standard Durso standpipe installation on this, and then the return comes back over the top. And unfortunately, that doesn't give me any kind of backup. If something does happen to go wrong, then I'm going to end up with water in the floor. But for now, I kind of take my chances with it. But overall, the system is happy and healthy. Everybody seems to be doing okay. Dealing with still some early new tank stuff on this. I've still got a little bit of gunk in the sand bed once in a while that I have to handle. This is the snail and frag plug graveyard that my Melanaris wrasse, when he kills a snail, he likes to drag the shell over to there. And so then I end up with a little graveyard there that I have to clean out every couple of weeks. It was very recently feeding time in here, so kind of got a couple corals that are closed up and still digesting. But it's a young tank still. Like I said, it's obviously not going to look amazing just yet, but it's getting there, and I'm very happy with it overall. So I'll walk you through some of the stuff now on the Apex setup, and we'll talk about that for just a minute. So hopefully by now you've invested into a controller of some sort. I happen to like the Apex, but use whatever works for you. But generally speaking, what it comes down to is it's just going to make your life easier. So I actually run 3 Apexes across my systems. The first one, this is my main tank Apex. And, obviously, as you can see, I've got a lot of stuff going on here. My Castle ATO return. So talking about the feeding stuff for just a minute. What we did was, thanks to a good friend of mine in MTRC, he hooked me up with a really cool couple of things here where I have 2 different types of feeders that happen. So this is like a V-feed 10 is what we called it. And basically what it means is if the outlet that we call V-feeder, which is a virtual feeder outlet, because we're using virtual outlets on this, if that outlet is on, then this V-feed 10 turns on, which then if you go into my skimmer, you'll see that if the outlet for V-feed 10 or 15 is on, then it turns the skimmer off. And so 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just kind of depending on whichever one works for you. gives you a nice little window there. So I have vFeed 10, vFeed 15, and vFeeder as my virtual outlets. And if you want to take a look at the programming for that, you can do so down in the comments on the YouTube video here. But my other Apex setup that I have, here's one for breakers, and very, very simple. Literally the only reason that I have this set up is because we almost lost everything in this tank because of a heater malfunction. So, you know, it just controls the heat, sits right around 77, 78 degrees pretty much constantly. Lights, pumps, heater, and that's pretty much the extent of it. That's the whole thing that's set up on the breakers tank. I don't have a whole lot going on in that tank, and so, you know, it's really there for just temperature control more than anything else. And then you'll see that I've got the garage tank as well, or the garage Apex as well. And the whole reason for that is I can turn on that mixing pump, and I can, you know, do it from my phone if I want to. So as I'm going through and setting up and doing water changes, I can drain all my water out, hop in here, go back to my Apex list, and go to the garage pump, turn on that mixing pump very easily, pump in however much water I need, and then shut it back off. So that's my Apex setup, and that is a little tour through the tanks for you. It's getting there, slowly but surely. Got a lot of stuff still left to do, but really happy with how things are turning out so far. So thanks for watching, and if you got any questions, any comments, leave them in the section below, or hit me up on Reef to Reef. I am defective_Weeble over there. You can find the whole walkthrough of my tank setup. I've got a link in the YouTube description, and then of course you can hit me up on Reef to Reef. Would love to chat with you, answer any questions you might have. Thanks.